The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched wider than any building on Earth. Thousands of seats rose in circles toward a ceiling made of living light. Representatives from 847 species filled those seats, their bodies strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Some had scales that shifted colors with their moods. Others floated in tanks of liquid or breathed through tubes connected to their home atmospheres. The hall hummed with the sound of translators, working to convert 100 languages into one. Captain Daniel Price stood at the entrance and tried not to let his jaw drop. He had trained for this moment for 3 years. He had studied every species in the galactic database. He had memorized protocols and customs and the proper ways to show respect. None of it prepared him for the reality of standing in a room full of aliens who had traveled between stars while humans were still learning to make fire. Ambassador Moore walked beside him with her head held high. She wore a simple blue suit, the color of Earth seen from space. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat style, and her eyes showed no fear. Behind them came Lieutenant Maria Santos, the communications officer whose job was to make sure nothing got lost in translation. The 3 humans walked down the long path toward the central platform. Silence spread through the hall as they passed. Daniel felt thousands of eyes watching them. Some of those eyes were curious. Many were amused. A few showed something close to disgust. A tall creature with purple skin and 4 arms stepped forward to greet them. This was Counselor, the current speaker of the assembly. His voice came through the translator as smooth and cold. "The Galactic Council recognizes the delegation from Earth," said. "You may present your request for membership." Stepped onto the speaking platform. The light in the room shifted to focus on her, making her seem very small and very alone. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she began. "Earth comes before you today seeking to join the community of civilized worlds. We have achieved faster-than-light travel. We have established peaceful contact with your explorers. We wish to learn from your wisdom and share what knowledge we have gained." A sound rippled through the hall. It took Daniel a moment to realize it was laughter. Different species laughed in different ways, but the meaning was clear. They were being mocked. A massive creature rose from the front row. His body was covered in thick gray plates like armor, and his eyes burned red in a face built for war. Daniel recognized him from his studies. This was Counselor of the leader of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "Share what knowledge?" asked. His voice was deep and rough. "What could creatures like you possibly teach us? Your species lives for less than 100 of your years. You are made of soft flesh that breaks at the slightest touch. Your world has been at war with itself since your kind learned to stand upright." "Did not flinch. We have much to learn, Counselor. That is why we are here." "You are here because you stumbled upon technology you do not understand," continued. "You built ships that barely hold together. You sent messages into space like children calling out in the dark. The galaxy has watched your little world for centuries, Ambassador. We have seen your wars, your cruelty, your endless hunger for destruction." Another voice joined in. This one came from a being that looked like a cloud of silver light contained in a floating sphere. They were the oldest species in the galaxy, keepers of knowledge stretching back millions of years. "The archives of thee are not open to temporary beings," the silver voice said. "Your species rises and falls like grass in a field. What would you do with knowledge that took us ages to gather? Burn it in another of your wars." Laughter filled the hall again. Daniel felt his hands form fists at his sides. Maria placed a gentle touch on his arm, warning him to stay calm. Stood perfectly still on the platform. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but steady. "I understand your concern," she said. "Earth has a troubled history. We have made terrible mistakes, but we have also learned from those mistakes. We have built societies based on cooperation. We have created art and music and science. We have looked up at the stars and wondered about our place among them." "Wondering is not the same as belonging," said. This council votes to deny Earth full membership. You may remain as observers, but you will have no voice and no vote. Perhaps in 1,000 years, when you have proven yourselves worthy, we will reconsider. The vote was quick and brutal. Species after species voted against Earth. A few abstained, but not one voted in favor. When it was done, bowed her head in acceptance. "We thank the Council for hearing our request," she said. "We will accept observer status and hope to prove ourselves in time." As the three humans walked back toward the exit, Daniel heard the whispers following them. The translators picked up fragments of conversation from all around the hall. "Did you see how small they are? Primitive creatures pretending to be civilized. They will destroy themselves within a century. A waste of time even speaking to them." Daniel kept his eyes forward and his back straight. He had never felt so humiliated in his life. All the training, all the preparation, all the hopes of billions of people back home meant nothing to these beings. They saw humans as insects, brief and meaningless. The walk back to their ship felt endless. None of them spoke until they were safely aboard the horizon, away from alien eyes and ears. Sat down heavily in a chair and let out a long breath. "Well," she said, "that went about as expected." Expected? Daniel could not keep the anger from his voice. "They treated us like animals. They laughed at us." "They did," agreed. "And they will continue to laugh until we give them a reason to stop." Maria was checking the communication logs. The whole galaxy watched that broadcast, Ambassador. Every species saw what happened in there. Nodded slowly. Her eyes were tired but not defeated. Daniel knew that look. He had seen it on commanders who had lost battles but not wars. "Let them watch," said. "Let them think they know what humans are. They see our short lives as weakness. They see our history as shame. They see our small bodies as proof that we are nothing." She stood up and walked to the window. Earth was not visible from here, lost somewhere in the vast darkness of space. But Daniel knew she was looking toward home. "They will learn who we are," said quietly. "Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday they will understand that everything they mock about us is exactly what makes us strong." An alarm suddenly cut through the ship. Maria rushed to her station, her fingers flying over the controls. "Ambassador, Captain, we are receiving an emergency signal," she said. "It is on all channels from every species in the galaxy." Daniel moved to look at her screen. The message was simple and terrifying. Something was coming from the edge of galactic space. Something that had destroyed 3 galaxies before this one. Something called the Swarm. The galaxy that had just mocked them was about to need their help. The swarm came like a wave of darkness across the stars. Trillions of creatures moved as one mind, consuming everything in their path. Planets that had stood for billions of years became dust within hours. The great civilizations of the galaxy watched in horror as their frontier worlds went silent one by one. Daniel stood on the observation deck of the horizon and watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Each report was worse than the last. The swarm did not negotiate. It did not stop. It simply consumed and moved forward, growing larger with each world it destroyed. Admiral Gregory Cole appeared on the communication screen. He was an older man with white hair and a face marked by decades of service. Earth Fleet had promoted him to overall commander the moment the threat became clear. "Captain Price, I need you to stay close to the Council," Admiral Cole said. "We are offering our assistance, but so far they have refused." Daniel shook his head. "They still think they can handle this alone, Admiral. They are sending their entire armada to stop the swarm at the frontier." "Their arrogance will get them killed," Cole replied. "Keep me informed. If they change their minds, we need to be ready." The Armada was the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. 10,000 warships, each one larger than anything Earth had ever built. Their weapons could destroy moons. Their shields could withstand the force of a small star going supernova. Counselor himself led the fleet from his flagship, confident that the swarm would break against might. Daniel watched the battle unfold through long-range sensors. For the first few minutes, it seemed like was right. Weapons tore through swarm creatures by the millions. The darkness pulled back, and cheers erupted across the galaxy. Then the swarm adapted. It happened so fast that Daniel almost missed it. The swarm creatures changed their formation. They developed new forms that absorbed the weapons instead of being destroyed by them. Within 10 minutes, the most powerful fleet in the galaxy was surrounded by enemies that their weapons could not hurt. They fought with everything they had, ordered new tactics, different weapons, desperate maneuvers. Nothing worked. The swarm learned every strategy within moments and developed perfect counters. One by one, the great warships fell silent. Escaped with less than 100 ships, 9,900 vessels were lost. The frontier was open, and the swarm pushed forward. Other species tried to stop them. They deployed defensive networks that had protected their worlds for millions of years. The swarm adapted and broke through in hours. They used biological weapons designed to destroy any living creature. The swarm absorbed the weapons and became immune. They tried to negotiate, offering entire star systems in exchange for peace. The swarm did not even acknowledge their messages. Panic spread across the galaxy. Worlds that had existed since before Earth's sun was born began planning evacuations. The Galactic Council met in emergency session, but no one had answers. Every strategy, every weapon, every defense had been tried and had failed. Daniel requested permission to address the council. He was granted 5 minutes as a courtesy, nothing more. The same beings who had laughed at humanity now looked at him with hollow eyes. "Counselors," Daniel said, "I have been studying the swarm since it arrived. I believe I have found something important." Looked up from his seat. His proud armor was cracked and burned from the battle. He had lost more than ships out there. He had lost his certainty. "Speak quickly," Human said. "We have little time for theories." "The swarm adapts to patterns," Daniel explained. "Every weapon you used followed logical sequences. Every tactic came from established military doctrine. The swarm recognized these patterns and developed counters almost instantly." "We are aware of this," a representative said. "That is precisely why nothing works against them." "But there is something you have not tried," Daniel continued. "You have not tried being unpredictable." The council stared at him. Some looked confused, others looked insulted. "Unpredictable," repeated. "War is not a game, Human. Proper military strategy requires planning, coordination, logical progression of forces." "And the swarm has defeated all of that," Daniel replied. "Every time. But humanity does not fight the way you do. Our history is full of wars where smaller forces defeated larger ones through surprise, through unconventional thinking, through doing things that made no logical sense." Maria had prepared files showing examples from human military history. Battles where generals had done the opposite of what they should have done, and won because of it. Campaigns built on deception and misdirection. Victories achieved through sheer stubborn refusal to follow the rules. The council watched in silence. They did not understand. How could chaos be a strategy? How could illogical actions lead to victory? "You mock our violent history," Daniel said, "but that history taught us something valuable. We learned that the enemy who cannot predict you cannot defeat you. The swarm expects patterns because every species it has faced thinks in patterns. Humans do not." Stepped forward to stand beside him. "Earth is offering its full military support. We know our ships are not as powerful as yours. We know our weapons are not as advanced. But we can do something none of you can do. We can fight without a pattern. We can be the chaos the swarm has never faced." Rose from his seat. His red eyes burned with a mixture of pride and desperation. He had lost everything to the swarm. His fleet, his confidence, his belief in superiority. but he was not ready to accept help from the species he had humiliated. "You think your primitive tactics can succeed where our advanced warfare failed?" he demanded. "I think we have nothing to lose by trying," Daniel replied, "and neither do you, not anymore." The vote was different this time. There was no laughter. There was no mockery. The galaxy was dying, and the beings who had dismissed humanity now faced a simple choice: accept help from the primitives or watch everything burn. The motion passed by a narrow margin. Earth was given permission to engage the swarm, though few expected them to survive. Daniel contacted Admiral Cole immediately. "They said yes, Admiral. We have authorization to proceed." Cole nodded on the screen. His expression was grim but determined. "Then we show them what humans can do. Prepare your ship, Captain. We are going to war." As Daniel left the council chamber, he passed standing alone by a window. The great warrior was staring out at the stars, watching the darkness spread. "You will fail," said without turning around. "And when you do, the galaxy will remember that its last hope was placed in the hands of creatures who live for less than a century." Daniel stopped beside him. "Maybe we will fail," he admitted, "but we will not fail quietly, and we will not fail predictably. That is something the swarm has never faced before." He walked away, leaving alone with his doubts. The war for the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity would fight it their way. The human fleet was nothing like the galaxy had ever seen. Where they had sent gleaming warships built for a single purpose, Earth sent everything it had. Military vessels flew alongside cargo ships that had been fitted with weapons. Mining craft carried explosives meant for asteroids. Passenger liners had been emptied of seats and filled with soldiers. It was a mess of ships that followed no standard design or formation. Admiral Cole commanded from the carrier Unity, but he gave his captains a simple order: do whatever works. Change tactics constantly. Never repeat the same attack twice. Daniel led a squadron of 12 ships toward the first engagement zone. Maria sat at the communications station, coordinating with other units spread across the combat area. General commanded the ground forces waiting to deploy on any stations or installations the swarm had captured. The swarm appeared on sensors like a cloud of death. Millions of creatures moving together, their bodies ranging from small fighters to massive living ships the size of moons. They moved with perfect coordination, a single mind controlling countless bodies. "All ships, this is Captain Price," Daniel said into the fleet channel. "Remember your training, remember what makes us different. We do not follow patterns. We do not repeat ourselves. We fight like humans." The first wave of Earthships attacked from 17 different directions at once. Some came in fast and hard. Others approached slowly, almost lazily. A few ships actually retreated before engaging, then turned and struck from unexpected angles. The swarm tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. Each human ship fought differently. Mining vessels launched asteroids at swarm clusters instead of missiles. Cargo ships opened their holds and released clouds of debris that confused swarm sensors. One creative captain flew his ship directly into a swarm formation, ejected his crew in escape pods, and detonated his reactor. The explosion took out thousands of swarm creatures. The swarm pushed back, killing human ships by the dozens. But for the first time in its existence, it could not predict what would happen next. Every time it developed a counter to one tactic, a completely different tactic replaced it. The humans kept changing, kept adapting, kept doing things that made no strategic sense. Watched from his damaged flagship, he had joined the human fleet against the advice of his remaining officers. He needed to see for himself what these primitives could do. What he saw made no sense to him. A commander would be executed for the kind of chaos unfolding before his eyes. Ships broke formation constantly. Captains ignored direct orders to pursue their own ideas. Soldiers on captured stations used music and flashing lights to confuse swarm drones instead of proper weapons. And somehow, impossibly, it was working. General led her troops onto a station that the swarm had captured 3 days earlier. Her soldiers did not march in neat formations. They spread out in small groups, each group fighting its own way. Some set traps using equipment they found on the station. Others played loud human music through the speakers, the strange sounds disrupting swarm communication. Herself fought with a weapon in each hand, switching between them constantly. When one weapon stopped working against adapted swarm forms, she threw it away and grabbed something else. A pipe, a broken piece of machinery, a chair. "General, you are supposed to be commanding from the rear," one of her officers said over the radio. "The swarm expects commanders in the rear," replied. "So I am in the front. Keep them guessing, soldier." The battle raged for 6 hours. Humans died by the hundreds. Ships burned and soldiers fell. But the swarm was taking losses it had never experienced before. Its perfect coordination kept breaking down as it tried to process an enemy that followed no rules. Daniel flew his ship through the heart of a swarm formation, firing in random patterns. Maria called out targets as they appeared, and Daniel ignored half of them, attacking different targets instead. The swarm creatures assigned to intercept him kept missing because they predicted where he should go, not where he actually went. A swarm creature latched onto his hull. Daniel activated the ship's external speakers and blasted human heavy metal music directly at it. The creature released its grip and flew away, confused by sounds it had never evolved to process. "Did that actually work?" Maria asked, staring at her screens. "I have no idea," Daniel admitted, "but it was unpredictable." On the station below, a soldier named Chris Palmer found himself surrounded by swarm drones. His weapons were empty. His squad was dead. He should have been finished. Instead, he started talking. He talked about his home in Ohio. He talked about his mother's cooking. He talked about the dog he had when he was a child. The swarm drones stood motionless around him, unable to process an enemy who responded to certain death with casual conversation. Palmer kept talking until reinforcements arrived. The rescuing soldiers found him sitting on a crate, describing his favorite baseball team to a circle of paralyzed aliens. "They have never heard anyone talk about the Cleveland Indians," Palmer said with a shrug. "Figured it might confuse them." As the battle reached its 6th hour, something unprecedented happened. The swarm began to pull back. Not a full retreat, but a repositioning. For the first time in recorded history, the swarm was uncertain. Admiral Cole sent the message across all channels. "All units press the advantage. Do not let them regroup. Keep the pressure on." Human ships surged forward, each one attacking in its own way. The swarm retreated further, trying to find a pattern in the chaos, trying to adapt to an enemy that refused to be predictable. Opened a channel to Daniel's ship. His voice was quiet, almost respectful. "I have studied war for 300 years, the said. "I have commanded fleets that conquered star systems. I have never seen anything like what your people did today." "We call it fighting dirty," Daniel replied. "It is not elegant, but it works." "It is insane," said. "Your tactics violate every principle of proper warfare. Your soldiers do things that should get them killed. Your commanders ignore their own orders." "And the swarm has no idea how to handle it," Daniel said. "That is the point." The retreat continued for another hour before the swarm finally stabilized far from the combat zone. Humanity had won its first major engagement. The cost was high. 200 ships lost, 3,000 soldiers dead, but the swarm had lost more, and more importantly, it had lost certainty. Reported from the recaptured station. Her voice was tired but triumphant. "Station secured, Admiral. The swarm creatures here are completely disorganized. They keep trying to predict our movements and failing." Cole nodded on the command screen. "Excellent work, General. All units begin recovery operations. We have shown them what humans can do." But even as the victory celebrations began, Maria picked up new swarm movements on long-range sensors. The creatures were regrouping and they were heading in a single direction, not toward the frontier, not toward the wealthy core worlds. They were heading toward Earth. Daniel felt his blood turn cold. "Admiral, are you seeing this?" "I see it," Cole replied. His voice was grim. "They have identified us as the real threat. They are coming for our home." The galaxy had mocked Earth. The swarm had decided to destroy it, and humanity would have to make its final stand on the world where everything began. The swarm came for Earth with its full force. Trillions of creatures crossed the void between stars, their numbers so vast that they blocked out the light from distant suns. Long-range sensors showed a wall of darkness approaching the solar system, and every human who saw those readings understood what it meant. This was not a battle. This was extinction coming to collect. Admiral Cole pulled back every ship to defend Earth. The fleet that had won such a surprising victory at the frontier now seemed tiny against the approaching storm. Daniel flew the horizon back to Earth and took up position in the defensive formation, knowing that formation would not last long once the fighting started. Moore had returned to Earth to help coordinate the global response. Every nation set aside old conflicts. Every factory switched to producing weapons. Every able person who could fight was given training and a role to play. The planet became a single united force for the first time in human history. Maria worked constantly at her station, coordinating communications between thousands of units across the planet and in space. She barely slept. None of them did. There was no time for rest when death was only days away. The Galactic Council debated for 2 full days about whether to send help. Many species argued that Earth should be sacrificed to buy time for evacuation of more important worlds. Others said the humans had proven themselves and deserved support. The debate grew heated, with ancient rivalries and old prejudices clouding judgment. Rose to speak on the final day of debate. His voice was heavy with something that sounded almost like shame. "I stood in this chamber and mocked humanity," he said. "I called them infants and primitives. I laughed at their short lives and their violent history. I was wrong." The chamber fell silent. Admitting error was almost unheard of. "I watched them fight," continued. "I saw soldiers continue battling with wounds that would kill my warriors. I saw commanders lead from the front when doctrine demands they stay safe. I saw chaos defeat the perfect order of the swarm. We were fools to dismiss them. We would be greater fools to abandon them now." The vote was close, but help was approved. 200 ships from a dozen species joined the human fleet. It was not much, but it meant that humanity would not die alone. The swarm reached the solar system on a Tuesday morning. Daniel remembered that detail because his mother had always said Tuesdays were lucky days. He hoped she was right. The battle began at the edge of the asteroid belt. Human ships and their few allies threw themselves at the swarm, fighting with the same unpredictable fury that had worked before. But there were simply too many enemies. For every swarm creature destroyed, 100 more took its place. The fleet fell back toward Mars, then toward the Moon, then toward Earth itself. Broadcast a message to the entire planet. Her voice was calm and clear, reaching every home, every shelter, every defensive position on the surface. "People of Earth," she said, "the enemy is at our doorstep. Our fleet is fighting with everything it has, but some of the swarm will reach the surface. When that happens, every one of you becomes a soldier. Fight with whatever you have. Think for yourselves. Do the unexpected. Show them what humanity truly is." The first swarm creatures broke through the defensive lines and began landing on Earth. They touched down in fields and cities across every continent, and they found a planet ready to fight back. In Tokyo, a group of engineers used construction equipment to crush swarm creatures between buildings. In Cairo, scholars who had studied ancient warfare built traps based on designs thousands of years old. In Dancers organized into squads that moved in patterns too artistic and random for the swarm to predict. In Montreal, musicians played songs at frequencies that disrupted swarm communication. Daniel fought in orbit until his ship took critical damage. He crashed on the surface near a small town in Kansas, where he found himself joining a group of farmers defending their land. They fought with hunting rifles and pitchforks and improvised explosives made from fertilizer. They were not soldiers. They were ordinary people who refused to let monsters take their home. A woman named changed the course of the battle. She was a school teacher from Nebraska who knew nothing about military tactics or advanced technology. But she understood radio waves because she had run the school's amateur radio club for 15 years. Notice that swarm creatures communicated using specific frequencies. She modified her radio equipment to broadcast static on those frequencies, and the creatures near her position suddenly lost coordination. They bumped into each other. They attacked randomly. They became confused and vulnerable. She shared her discovery with Maria, who spread it across the global network within minutes. Every radio station, every amateur operator, every piece of communications equipment on Earth began broadcasting disruption signals. The effect was immediate and devastating. The swarm on Earth's surface began to falter. Creatures that had moved with perfect unity now stumbled and hesitated. Human defenders pushed back, driving the invaders into kill zones where their numbers meant nothing against their confusion. In orbit, the remaining fleet saw the swarm formations breaking apart. Admiral Cole ordered an immediate counterattack, and human ships surged forward into gaps that had not existed moments before. Led his small squadron into the heart of the swarm, his damaged ship dealing death with every weapon it had left. Daniel rejoined the battle in a commandeered shuttle, flying into the chaos with a crew of volunteers who had never been to space before. They did not know proper tactics or combat procedures. They simply aimed at enemies and fired until those enemies were gone. The swarm tried to adapt to the radio disruption, but humans kept changing the frequencies. Every time the creatures developed immunity to one signal, a different signal replaced it. Billions of individual human minds were thinking and creating and adapting faster than the single swarm mind could process. Maria tracked the swarm's central intelligence node. It was a massive living ship hidden behind layers of defenders, the brain that coordinated all the swarm's actions. If it could be destroyed, the entire invasion might collapse. "Daniel, I have located the command creature," she reported, "but it is too deep in their formation. No ship can reach it." Daniel looked at the tactical display. She was right. The node was surrounded by millions of defenders. Any ship that tried to reach it would be destroyed long before it got close. But Daniel had stopped thinking about survival hours ago. He thought about the farmers in Kansas and the teacher in Nebraska and the billions of people fighting across the planet. They were all risking everything. He could do no less. "Maybe no ship can reach it and come back," Daniel said, "but a ship does not need to come back." He aimed his shuttle at the heart of the swarm and pushed the engines to full power. The defenders converged on him, but he flew erratically, changing course constantly, refusing to give them a pattern to predict. Behind him, other human ships followed his example, each one flying its own chaotic path toward the center. Most were destroyed. Some got through. Daniel's shuttle reached the command node with seconds of power remaining. He saw the massive creature ahead of him, its body pulsing with the thoughts of trillions of swarm units. He armed every weapon his shuttle carried. "Maria," he said into the radio, "tell we did it." He flew directly into the command node and detonated everything at once. The explosion was visible from Earth. The swarm across the entire solar system went silent at the same moment, their connection to the controlling mind severed forever. Creatures that had fought with perfect coordination now drifted aimlessly, easy targets for the surviving human ships. The battle for Earth was over. Humanity had survived. But in the silence that followed, Maria searched desperately for any signal from Daniel's shuttle. She found only debris floating in the darkness where the command node had been. 6 months had passed since the swarm fell silent. The galaxy was still recovering from the devastation, but hope had returned to worlds that had expected only death. Ships traveled again between stars. Communications networks hummed with messages of rebuilding and renewal. The nightmare was over. The Galactic Council chamber was full again, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Where there had been mockery and dismissal, there was now respect and curiosity. 847 species had watched humanity save them all, and they were still trying to understand how it happened. Daniel Price walked into the chamber with a slight limp. His injuries from the battle had healed, but some damage remained. He had been found drifting in an escape pod 2 days after the final explosion, unconscious and barely alive. The doctors said he should not have survived. He told them that humans were stubborn that way. Moore walked beside him, her blue suit now bearing a small medal given to her by the council itself. Maria Santos followed behind, promoted to full commander for her role in coordinating the global defense. And behind them came the school teacher whose radio discovery had turned the tide of battle. The council had invited them to speak, not as observers begging for membership, but as honored guests who had earned the right to stand among equals. Counselor welcomed them with a bow that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Stood in the front row, his armor repaired but still showing scars from the fighting. The great warrior had fought alongside humans until the very end, and something in him had changed forever. The council recognizes the delegation from Earth, announced. We are gathered today to offer humanity full membership in the Galactic Assembly, with all rights and privileges that status includes. Applause spread through the chamber. It was strange to hear aliens cheering for the species they had once dismissed as primitive insects. Daniel waited for the sound to fade before stepping forward to the speaking platform. "Thank you, Counselor," he said. "On behalf of Earth, I accept this offer with gratitude. But before we proceed, I would like to say something to this assembly." The chamber fell quiet. Every eye focused on the small human standing alone in that vast space. 6 months ago, you laughed at us, Daniel said. You called us temporary beings. You mocked our short lives and our violent history. You thought our weaknesses made us worthless. He paused, letting the memory sink in. Some of the aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. You were wrong, Daniel continued. Not because we proved ourselves stronger than you expected. You were wrong because you did not understand what our weaknesses really mean. He activated a display showing images from the war. Human ships flying into impossible odds. Soldiers fighting with wounds that should have killed them. Civilians building weapons from farming equipment and household items. We live short lives, Daniel said. That means every moment matters to us. We do not waste time on things that do not count. We fight harder because we know our time is limited. We love deeper because we know separation is coming. We create urgently because we know our chance to create will end. The images changed to show humans helping each other. Soldiers carrying wounded comrades. Strangers sharing food and shelters. People from enemy nations working together to defend their planet. We have fragile bodies, Daniel continued. That means we learn to protect each other. No human survives alone. We build families and communities and nations because we need each other. Our weakness taught us cooperation. It taught us to trust. It taught us that the being beside you might save your life, so you should be ready to save theirs. Stepped forward to stand beside him. You saw our violent history as proof of our savagery, she said. But we see it differently. We have fought so many wars that we understand war completely. We know its costs. We know its horrors. We hate it more than any species in this galaxy because we have seen what it does to those we love. She gestured toward, who looked nervous standing in a chamber full of alien leaders. "This woman is a teacher," said. "She has never fired a weapon. She has never commanded troops. She spent her life helping children learn, and she helped save the galaxy because she understood something about radio waves and was willing to share that knowledge with anyone who needed it." Stepped forward hesitantly. Her voice was quiet, but the chamber's systems carried it to every ear. "I just did what made sense," she said. "I saw a problem and I thought maybe I could help. That is what teachers do. We solve problems. We help people learn. It did not matter that I was nobody important. I had an idea and I shared it and people used it to survive." Daniel took the speaking platform again. "That is the true power of humanity. Not our weapons, not our ships, not our technology. It is our people, every single one of them. The swarm expected to face one enemy. Instead, it faced 8 billion individual minds, each one thinking and adapting and creating solutions that no single intelligence could predict." Rose from his seat. His voice was rough with emotion he rarely showed. "I have watched humans die to save strangers," he said. "I have seen them share their last food with enemies who had tried to kill them. I have witnessed courage that defies all logic and compassion that serves no tactical purpose. They are not what we thought they were. They are something we should all aspire to become." The chamber erupted in discussion. Species that had never agreed on anything found themselves united in respect for the small beings who had saved them all. When order was restored, the vote for Earth's membership was unanimous, but Daniel was not finished. "We do not want to simply join your assembly," he said. "We want to change it. The swarm came so close to destroying everything because the galaxy was divided. Each species protected its own knowledge and hoarded its own resources. When the threat came, you could not unite quickly enough to stop it." He proposed something revolutionary, a new alliance based on shared knowledge and mutual support, that would open their archives to all species, that would train other militaries. Earth would share its strategies of unpredictability and adaptation. Every world would help every other world, because the next threat might be worse than the swarm. The proposal sparked the longest debate in Council history, but in the end it passed. The galaxy would never be the same. A week later, Daniel stood on an observation deck high above Earth. The planet turned slowly below him, blue and green and brown and beautiful. Cities sparkled with lights. Ships moved between orbital stations. Life continued, precious and temporary and wonderful. Maria found him there, staring at the world they had nearly lost. "They have opened their first archive to human researchers," she said. "They are requesting exchange officers to study our tactics. 14 species have asked to establish embassies on Earth." Daniel nodded slowly. 6 months ago, they would not even let us vote." 6 months ago, they did not know who we were," Maria replied. "Now they do." They stood together in silence, watching Earth turn. Somewhere down there was back in her classroom, teaching children about radio waves and probably not mentioning that she had helped save the galaxy. Somewhere, farmers were replanting fields that had been. Somewhere, families were healing from losses that would never fully fade. "Do you think it will last?" Maria asked. "The alliance, the cooperation, all of it." Daniel thought about the question for a long time. He thought about human history with its endless cycles of war and peace. He thought about the aliens who had mocked humanity and then fought beside them. He thought about the swarm, destroyed but not the last threat the galaxy would ever face. "I think it will last as long as we make it last," he finally said. "One day at a time, one choice at a time, that is all anyone can do." Maria smiled. "That sounds very human." "It is," Daniel agreed. "And maybe that is what the galaxy needs, a little more humanity." He looked down at the planet one more time. The world that had been mocked by the stars. The world that had refused to accept its weakness. The world that had shown the galaxy what true power really meant. "They thought we were weak because we die," Daniel said quietly. They never understood. We fight so hard because every moment matters. We love so deeply because we know it will end. We are not powerful despite being temporary. We are powerful because of it. The stars shone down on Earth, no longer mocking, now full of hope for a future that humanity would help build.